I'm going to introduce to you Foundation Maps Professional 2.0. This is part of a monthly webinar series that we're going to host describing new and cool features that crop up in Foundation Maps, Professional especially. And in this case, there's a couple of new things that we've launched in the last couple of weeks that we're very excited about and wanted to share. First of all, who I am Jake Garcia. I'm the Vice President for Data and Technology Strategy at the Foundation Center. So my purview is all the programmers that work on Foundation Maps and the folks that do the data and the data that ends up getting into all of our products. So what is Foundation Maps? Foundation Maps is a data visualization platform that we built in-house here at the Foundation Center that shows the philanthropy and grant-making activity worldwide. What we're seeing here on the screen is when you first log into Foundation Maps Professional, you get the full gamut of the grants we've got in the database. There's 3.5 million grants worth $236 billion, 38,000 funders to roughly 360,000 recipients. And as you can see by the orange bubbles, there's a lot of activity, a lot of grant recipients all around the world. Of course, there are a lot of grant recipients in the United States, but there's also grant recipients in all over Africa, Asia, South America, and Australia, and Europe, obviously. You can switch the view to look at the funders, and here we've got these blue bubbles, and here we can see that the majority of the data that we have, the grant-making activity is from U.S. foundations, but increasingly we have a lot more grant-making activity being tracked from foundations around the world. In this case, Mexico, Australia, Kenya, the UK, etc. So the reach of the foundations and grant-making activity is expanding worldwide. Another feature, and this feature is only available in Professional, which is the charts, and this was a pre-existing feature, but I wanted to go ahead and show it anyway. In this case, let's say that you were up in the subject area, and you chose education, arts and culture, and health, and these are pretty big items that are top-level items in our taxonomy for subjects. And then you can actually see how they have progressed and charted over time. On the left, the chart is showing the number of grants given per year in our database. And we can see here that there is a pretty big dip in the number of grants for education between 2008, 2010 or so. It recovered. And you can see on the right, the total dollar value of grants also kind of did this dip in the 2009 area. That is the result of the change in grant making as a result of the financial crisis. And then after 2013, 2014, you can see that there's a dotted line here. This means that we're still collecting and completing the data sets for those years. Obviously, 2015 just started, and foundations, unless they're e-reporting their data to us, we're not aware of all the grant-making activity in 2015 and 14, although 2013 is very close to being completed. One of the other features that has been in Foundation Maps Professional for a while is this thing called Pathways. And Pathways is a really good tool to kind of find prospects, either for when you're fundraising, or for finding, if you're a foundation, finding foundations to partner with, or finding out who your cohort is also funding but you're not funding. In this case, let's say they were starting with the World Wildlife Fund, and we're saying, so who are the top funders for the World Wildlife Fund? Well, they are National Postal Code Lottery, the Moore Foundation, and Packard. Well, who are their top recipients other than the World Wildlife Fund? And here we've got a few cases here, California Institute of Technology. Well, who is California Institute of Technology's other top funders who are not giving to World Wildlife Fund? And there's McKnight and Keck and Oak and a few of these other ones. So this is like 3 degrees of separation. And this is the kind of thing that we're showing more and more as far as the relationships between funders and nonprofits. And you can narrow this down to certain subjects or to certain regions and really start to target, if you're a foundation, who should we be partnering with? And if you're a nonprofit, like, who should we be partnering with? But also, who are some funders that we can talk to who are funding my cohort but aren't funding me? So let's talk about Foundation Maps Professional 2.0, the new features. First, the most obvious one is that there is now a free trial that's available. All you have to do is click Try It for Free down in the lower left part of maps.foundationcenter.org. And then it asks you a few basic questions, and then you can click register for a free trial. And what that does is gives you free, complete access to Foundation Maps Professional up until midnight of the following day. So basically it's a one-day free trial, but if you were to sign up right now for Foundation Maps Professional, you would have access to it until Thursday night at midnight Eastern Time. So you would get about a day and a half of uses out of it. One of the features that we are extremely excited about is something that we've been talking about at the Foundation Center for years and years, which is geographic area served. In the previous examples where I showed the bubbles that were orange, and I'm going to flip back a little bit, this represents recipient locations. So you got recipients in the United States and Brazil, et cetera. Here we've got recipients of, locations of foundations around the world. But sometimes there might be a grant from, let's say, a foundation in Seattle to a nonprofit who's based in Washington, D.C., but the grant is really serving Kenya. That's where this comes in. So the shading here shows the geographic area served of a grant. So that case where I said there was a funder in the United States and a recipient in the United States, but the geographic area served is Kenya. Now in this view of the map, which is different shades of green, Kenya would be where that grant would show up and not in the United States. This is basically a very useful tool to find gaps and overlaps in funding. If you're thinking about environmental funding or education funding, you want to see where are the dollars going and where they're not dollars going, and maybe that's a place to target. The other one, this is more in beta because we've got a lot of, we're trying to figure out every use case that this might be applicable to, but this is called Constellations. So a minute ago I showed you guys pathways, and pathways is a way of seeing, it's the kind of the 6 degrees of Kevin Bacon, but in the philanthropy world. In this case, what if you just wanted to see the whole network? How's everybody connected, and who's in the middle, who's central, and who's on the outside? In this case, we're looking, let's say we said, let's look at grants for activities in Los Angeles, California, where the geographic area served is California, in support of arts and culture. And right now, because of what the app's going to do is show you the biggest relationship, the largest relationships. So here you can see these orange bubbles are recipients and blue are foundations. And we can see University of Southern California here, Museum Associates over here, a couple of funders like Irvine Foundation, Broad Foundation. These guys, it looks like it's a pretty densely connected network. There's, a lot of foundations have multiple relationships to nonprofits, and those nonprofits have multiple relationships with foundations. It's pretty densely packed. But then if you go out here, you can see, okay, the George Lucas Family Foundation, they're not quite on the inside. It doesn't mean they're not well connected or don't know everybody, but for this specific criteria, LA, arts and culture, not as central. And you see here on the edge, there's a lot of kind of singular relationships where you've got a foundation and a nonprofit, and they're just not connected to the rest of the network. We think there's a lot of really great potential for this particular thing. It's in beta, and so we really are interested in seeking feedback from folks about, does it make sense? Is it cool? We've got a couple of use cases, like you combine 3 foundations together and see who they fund in common. There's a couple of other cases I'll show you in a few minutes that actually might be a better demonstration. But this is something that we're really eager to get feedback on because something like this hasn't existed yet in philanthropy. So we're very curious about it. So aside from our wish list about what we want to learn, we want to be able to tell you about the things that Foundation Maps can be used for in your work. So let's take the case of Kenya. And let's say you're looking for, okay, who are the recipients of grants, for education grants, that is. You can see education here. You type in Kenya in location, you type in education and subject area, and here we can see we've got 287 grants, $19 million, 48 funders, et cetera. And here's the distribution of the recipients of grants in Kenya for education. Now let's say we switched it, and this is where you'd switch it, the layers over here on the left. Switch it to geographic area served or just area served. And we can actually see, if you look at this summary up here where it says 415 grants, 39 million, well, if we're just looking at recipients in Kenya, it's 287 versus 19 million, 415 versus 39. So basically the number of grants went up dramatically and the dollar value of the grants doubled. So this is because, there's some recipients who are not in Kenya, but they're receiving grants that are targeting Kenya. Another feature is that you can change the scale. Over here on the left, we're looking at countrywide grants. But you can actually look at the city level for geographic area served for those cases where the geographic area served is the city, not a country. And then you can click on the individual cities and say this is Wajir. We can see 3 grants. Again, this is just education, $62,000. And then you can drill in and get some more information about that grant, those funders, those recipients. Here's a case of that. So this is in the list view, or you can get it by clicking on anything in this pop-up. So the list view is really kind of one of the endpoints, where the destination is when people want to see the data, they go to one of the list views. So you can just click on list view if you want to skip the map altogether, or click on it from the map. And in this case, this is geographic area served. We've got HEVOS. They're in The Hague, in the Netherlands. This is a recipient of grants related to Kenya. We've got United Nations High Commissioner for Refugees based in Geneva. And just look down the list. None of these recipients are in Kenya. And look at the dollar amounts of these grants. They're pretty large grants. So this is kind of proving the value of geographic area served. There are lots of players who are not based in Kenya who are serving Kenya. And who are the foundations that are giving those grants that serve Kenya? We got Hewlett, that National Postcode Lottery, Ford Foundation, Sachs, Gates, Lilly Endowment, etc. Again, none of these based in Kenya, but they are giving grants that geographically serve Kenya. So this is an example of what happens when you drill in. So if I was to click on the Hewlett Foundation, you click on them and say, okay, let's look at those grants just from Hewlett. You can say Hewlett to HEVOS, Hewlett to the Research Triangle Institute, again, Hewlett to HEVOS, 2014, here's a $2.5 million grant, pretty recent. You can sort by different things, and then you can go and get some detail. So this is one single grant record. This is from the Hewlett Foundation to HEVOS, $3 million. It's for education, research. The population served is economically disadvantaged. Type support is program development. Geo area served is Kenya, and here's the description for the implementation of a civil society assessment of student learning in East Africa. So there's some good information in this. We've got millions of these. Right now, we code hundreds of thousands of these per year, but starting very soon, we're going to be coding millions of grants per year. We showed you earlier a case of Constellations when it was Los Angeles and arts and culture. But now we're looking at education in Kenya. And the one thing that stands out to me in this case is, remember before we looked at Constellations, it was very densely packed. It was kind of hard to make sense of it because kind of all the foundations and nonprofits were interlinked in multiple ways. So in this case, the thing that first pops out to me is how disconnected this network is. Over here you can see, yes, a lot of these folks are connected, but only with like 1 or 2 links. Here's the Goldman Sachs Foundation with 4 nonprofits, but those nonprofits didn't get any funding from any of the other funders in this community. Here's Trust Africa, gave money to a bunch of nonprofits. They're not connected. Koch Foundation, bottom left. So this is actually more of a fragmented network than would be than the Los Angeles arts and culture community. And then if you can drill in from here too. So in this case, who's this funder right here? It's got lots of relationships. Looks like, I don't know, 30-something nonprofits. Well, you can actually click on them, and it says this is the Kenya Community Development Foundation, saying they're very central to the network. I think that's cool information. Are they on the inside? Are they on the periphery? And then it shows you the total, and again, you can drill into the grants from here. One of the things that we think this is really cool for is for presentations. So let's say you're making a case to your board or to grantees, or you're a recipient and you want to talk to a funder and say, hey, look at this network. Here's where we are in the network. You can click the PDF button over here on the right, and this is in any view. You can do this in the lists, in the map, in pathways, in constellations, and then this will spit out a PDF that gives you something that you can either put into a PowerPoint, or you can use it as a standalone or add to another PDF. In this case, this is showing this is the whole network. This is 415 out of all 415 grants that we've got for Kenya for supportive education, and it shows you the whole network that way. Again, this use case I think is pretty valuable, especially if you want to try to show where you are in a network. I'm going to keep going. We'll show a couple more features, and then what we'll do is we'll open it up, and one of my colleagues is looking through some questions. So please submit questions into the Q&A section, and so what we'd like to do is put some questions in there, and then we will we'll screen those, and then I'll answer the questions in the order they come in, I think. So let's do another use case. This is environmental grant making in Florida. So let's say you're looking at geographic areas served of Florida, and the topic is the environment. On the left side, you can look at geoscale. So you could say, okay, statewide, you can get statewide grants. County-wide, and this breaks it up by county, and there's a little legend over here that'll show you dark green means more money, and light green means less money, and white means no dollars. And here's where you can get information about what's going on in different counties for environment. So let's say you went down here and clicked on this county, which ends up being Miami-Dade. You can see there's $27 million in grants. You can also then switch to the city view and see the cities. And this is, it makes sense if you know Florida at all as far as where the major highways are and where the major cities are. You can get a list. Lots of these funders. You've got funders in Florida for sure, but you also have Pew and CERDNA. And again, these are ones, Area Served. This is serving Miami-Dade County, Florida. It's for the environment. Go back and look at that view of the cities. So let's say that this is it. You found what you were looking for. You want to make sure that you can come back. And one of the things that's important is to be able to save your searches. So let's say you've zoomed in and you're looking at Florida and it's citywide and the environment, and you're like, don't make me come back in here and type any of this again, or re-find what it is, or I found something fascinating, I want to come back and make that my starting point. You just push over here on the right, it says save this search, and then you type in whatever you want to type in, and then you come back and you've got your saved searches area, and this shows here, there's a little world view. This is a map, and it tells you a little bit about the subject and gives you the URL. And this one you stated is UK Arts Jobs, and then it gives you a link and shows you that it's a list view application. So you can start saving them there. Another handy feature, and this is for professional only, it's not available in the free trial, is CSV or Excel download. And this is, you get the top 10, or the 10, if you're in the list view, you get the 10 that you're looking at. So if you need to quickly export something, you can download it this way and get the top 10 grant makers, top 10 recipients. And let's go back to Constellations. Again, you can hover over any of the individual organizations that are there. It'll highlight their first degree of separation. So you can see here, looks like Fairchild Tropical Botanic Garden. You hover over them and it highlights all of their funders. It's kind of a fun thing to do, especially in very densely packed networks. You can see some pretty fascinating patterns. Okay, so this is where I'd like to open it up for questions. I can hopefully do some a live demo of some of the features, but of course depending on the questions. And at any time, and we'll come back to the slides, so you don't have to copy it down just now, but maps@foundationcenter.org is where you can contact us. Let's go ahead and open the floor for questions. Amanda, my colleague Amanda Dillon, Manager of Strategic Philanthropy. Are there any questions that have come in?
Yeah, so one of the questions asked is, are these pages online printable?
Yes. There's a couple of ways you can print it. I mean, you could just go into, one of the things here is you can see you could just print it, from just the browser's printer, but I would recommend, let's say you're going to the list view, we're seeing Open Society Institute, this is what I really want. You click PDF, and that basically, you'd go get that way. That's the cleanest way to do it, and to make sure that it's kind of paginated correctly. If you just print it from the browser, it'll work, but depending on the browser, it might break the page in the middle of the map or do some other strange behaviors. But yeah, yes, definitely printable.
Okay, great. Another question we had was, is this product available for use free of charge in the Foundation Center libraries?
That's a great question. Yes, it is available free of use, free of charge in our Foundation Center's public libraries. There are also a bunch of the Funding Information Networks locations called FINS internally here. But you can find out information on Funding Information Network locations. That's a lot of public libraries, I think 400 or 500, mostly public libraries around the country and outside the United States. So either at our facilities or at one of these network locations, you can use Foundation Maps in addition to other Foundation Center resources like Foundation Directory Online for free. And I think that's a good resource, a good way to really get in there and do stuff without having to do the 24-hour free trial.
Great. Another question came up was, does Foundation Maps use the same data that is available in FTO?
The answer is yes. Oh, and I've got a quick comparison grid, which is helping me. There are some differences for sure. I'd say that 96%, 97% of the data is identical. There are some very subtle differences. I won't go over all the subtle differences, but essentially what Foundation Maps has right now is more inclusive of everything and includes a lot of non-United States foundations, so foundations outside the U.S., and includes some small grants, and includes a lot more information from those foundations who give us their data directly. However, the plan, and I would say this is going to happen in the next, let's say, 4 to 6 months, is that not only will the number of grants dramatically increase in Foundation Maps, let's say 6 months, the number of grants is going to dramatically increase, and then FDO and Foundation Maps will be 100% in lockstep. They will have the exact same data. So right now, it's the vast, vast majority, and then in 6 months, they'll be identical.
Great. Next question, is there a way to search by EIN?
That's a great question. As of right now, there is not a way to search by EIN, but it is something that we have heard from customers before and that we could include. But this is one of the things that when we built the application, we were like, what are the most common use cases? And this one came up today. Someone said, what about the Robin Hood Foundation? Well, you can type in Robin Hood Foundation as a grant maker, great, and you get their data. That's great, but that was typing it in by name. And that's what we assumed everybody's main use or purpose would be. If we find out from a couple of folks that EIN number is really the way to go, you could add that feature, and we could say instead of organization name, say organization unique identifier or something like that. EIN creates kind of a problem when it comes to institutions outside of the United States. So we'd probably need to include some other, like the bridge ID or some other kind of international identifier, which we will also have in the database. So it's definitely something that we would consider. We'd love to hear from customers about that kind of thing. It's a feature we'd be glad to do. Any other questions?
Yeah, so the next question is, how frequently is the data updated to include new grants?
That's a great question. The data is updated weekly, but the process is kind of the more important part. Our ideal scenario, and we've got a lot of, if I go back to the big summary here and clear out everything, we've got 3.5 million grants. We add several 100,000 a year, and again, we're going to be adding, I think probably 2 million a year going forward. So this number is going to be dramatically going up. But the thing that we classically did was we got data from the IRS forms, the 990-PF. We'd collect that data, and we'd process it. But of course, there's a lag time for by the time a foundation files. Then by the time it gets processed by the IRS, then they turn it back around, then we get it in digital form, et cetera. It takes a long time. The way we prefer it is, and more foundations, it's around 1,000 foundations now, give us data this way, is through the e-reporting program. And the e-reporter program is awesome. I'm going to look it up for I'm going to spell it right. The idea is that electronic reporting program, this is where foundations can sign up, and there's all kinds of different initiatives going on now. This is where foundations can give us data on a regular basis, and some foundations give us data quarterly, and that way we get that data and we can put it in instantly. So if I clear out this world, and I go look at the grants, and I sort by the year, basically what's going to end up showing is that we've got some grants from 2015. So let me sort again this other way. So the only way to get these grants from Gates Foundation, from Lilly, from Marion, the way that we can get these is through the e-reporting program. So it's updated weekly, but for the freshest data, we really need foundations to be giving it to us directly.
Great. Is there a plan to merge FTO and Foundation Maps?
There are not currently plans to merge Foundation Maps and Foundation Directory Online. But again, there's some factors that depend on what the customers are and what the different use cases are. In this case, we really are trying to show aggregate totals and top funders lists and trends over time and geographic distribution. Foundation Directory Online is more for grant seeking and due diligence and lots of details on who the board members are, foundations, and things like that. So currently there aren't any plans to do that, but there might be ways that we will combine certain features of Foundation Maps or actually include some of the data from Foundation Directory Online into Foundation Maps. Okay, that's it? That's all the questions? Okay.
Do we want to give anyone else 5 more minutes or a couple more minutes to type in any questions that you might have?
Oh, and I see that Sabit Khan has raised a hand.
So we've responded to her within the webinar.
You did? Okay, okay, good.
Thanks for your questions, Sabine. We'll be in touch with you after.
Okay. So, okay. Do you want me to do a demo, a little demo?
Yeah.
Okay. So let's try. I'm going to do one of those use cases, and we'll just kind of see how it works in real time. So let's go back to the map. Let's say, you know what? I'm from Texas. So let's pick on Texas a little bit. We get Texas, and here we can see. Here are all the bubbles for Texas. Let's go down here. I'm originally from Austin. Here's Travis County, and we get details. Let's say, okay, you know what? Who are the foundations giving to recipients? And you can see here the top foundation to recipients in Austin is the Dell Foundation. Then you got Gates. Let's explore Gates a little bit. Gates, here's their mission statement. Here's some basic profile information. We can look at the grants. Again, these are to recipients in Austin. Here's a big $30 million grant to the University of Texas. But let's say that the Gates Foundation, I'm interested in them. Corbin, I guess it's kind of, they're a big funder, right? So we can actually look at this thing called, it's called subjects here, but internally we also call it the windrow. It looks like a flower. You can change it to look at the amount of money. So you can see that Gates here, their funding is mostly for health, education, medical research, and international foreign affairs. That makes sense. One of the features that we think is really, really cool that I keep forgetting we have is this thing called, click on the play button, click on here, and then what it'll do is show year over year the changes in the funding priorities for that foundation. So we can see here that that was a big medical research year. Oh, then health just sprung back up. This is kind of it's a good exercise to see if anything has changed with the foundation over the years because there's lots of information there to go through. Let's do another case. Okay, this has been pretty interesting. Let's go look at California. You say, okay, this is pretty cool. Let's go to San Diego. No, actually, let's do this. Let's go to geographic area served for California. So now we should see shading by county in California. And here this makes sense, LA County and around the Bay Area, Silicon Valley there. Let's say that, we're really interested in science funding. Let's go look at science. These numbers are going to go down pretty dramatically in a sec. So we've got 1.3 billion. That's actually not too bad. I thought it would be lower. So what's going on over here? So you see that there's science funding over here. I'm predicting it's probably, Santa Cruz or University of California. You can click in there. You can see what's going on. Look at the recipients. I was wrong. Monterey Bay Aquarium Research Institute, and look at their grants. Another thing that I think is really valuable. Let's go look at San Diego. And this was available in the earlier version. It's been available for a while. Let's go look at the recipients in San Diego for science. Okay, here we can see a grid. Drill in a little bit. You can get all the way down. If you just keep zooming in, you can actually get down to individual street corners. So you can see here's a nonprofit. Click on the bubble, figure out what they're all about. Let's go see them. San Diego Education Fund. You can see there is a $7,500 science grant. And you can see that it's for the NIE Science Curriculum Guide. So I'm just kind of going through a couple of use cases here, but one of the ones that I think is pretty cool is demographics. Okay, I think we've got a couple of questions on deck. Real quick, let's say we wanted to look at the Hispanic population in San Diego. It's going to make a call to our server and then come back and it's going to show us some shading for the Hispanic population. And here we can see where it's dark blue, and we have a legend here that shows the information about what it's showing. But we can see that there's dark blue, this is where the Hispanic population is concentrated. Click on this Draw Shape button, and let's say we want to take a look at this area. I'm interested in this. Let me see here. Strange shape, but maybe that's my area of interest. And then you can go and look at demographic trends over time, so that we can see the Hispanic population in this area of interest, which is this, this U shape here. Actually, the Hispanic population has actually gone up pretty steadily, and the Black, Native American populations have decreased. Median household income has gone up. So it tells a pretty interesting story about this region. Maybe this is something worth looking into. Let's zoom in. Again, we're looking only at science grants here, but let's say we're looking for science grants in a predominantly Hispanic neighborhood. Let's see who this happens to be. I didn't actually look at this, so let's see what we got here. $10,000 grant back in 2007. Science grant, population served as children for the SOTA. Honor schools have demonstrated excellence in math and science education. So I think this shows a pretty good use case for how demographics and foundation and nonprofit and grant data can actually really be useful in figuring out your strategies.
Okay, great. So 2 more questions came in while Jake was giving that demo on demographics. The first one is, are these grants authorized versus paid?
That's a good question. I believe it's authorized because paid implies actual payments per year, and I believe that you can have a grant that's authorized in 1 year but then paid out over several years. So in this case, we're looking at then the authorized date. And the authorized is actually what ends up showing up on Foundation's IRS forms also. It's authorized.
Okay, another question. Can we do something like, I'm curious about how much funding outside of the United States are being provided by funders from Michigan, that is per where they're located, but also looking at their geographical area served.
Okay. Okay. I don't think we can serve that case exactly, but we can get pretty close. So let me get rid of the U.S. demographics there. Let's say that we want to look at specifically funders in Michigan. So let's try something out. We might be able to get this a couple of different ways. So let's look at Michigan. Okay, great. But really we want foundations in Michigan. Great. We got foundations in Michigan. Let's go look at a quick list here. Well, looks like we're into a bit of a bug right there. But let me think about how else we can get to this data. We want to do area served, but we want to do area served outside the United States. Is that right?
Yeah, so maybe we can do geo area served and then sort by the location of the foundation.
Yes, we could do that. So let's say we want to go look at geographic area served. And let's do clear all. Let's go back to the world. So let's look at Nigeria. I don't know if there's a perfect use case, but let's look at the foundations who are serving. Now, a lot of these are in different places. You can actually sort by state. And in this case, these are in different countries. But then you can click through the pagination. Here we've got ones in Arkansas. Here we've got California. This is a little bit more time intensive than people might want to do, but this is definitely a way that we can get at it. And this is, again, this is just for the case of, Nigeria and Michigan. I don't know if we're going to come up with an actual answer for that one, but we are pretty close. Here we go. We got Kellogg, McKnight, and, nope, actually just Kellogg and this other one, G-IL charities, or G2 charities. So this is one way of getting it, but then you'd have to go country by country in this case. that's another good use case, though, that we will log, and we'd love to hear about more cases like this, because either we could provide some way of doing that in the user interface, or maybe it's a special project. A lot of times we'll do projects for Foundation where there's something really custom that really can't be done in the application because it's very specialized, like one we're doing about economic empowerment in some parts of Africa, or about large independent foundations in Mexico or something like that, where we want to actually add some more filters. It's a good question, though. I'll get back to you on that. I think there's a way we can get at the answer faster than that, though.
So if you want to give another example, we're still, if there's anyone else on the webinar who has any other questions, please type them in.
Okay, great. And I'll do one. Okay, I'll try one more because I want to show constellations because I like it so much. Let's do a case where we've got Detroit. And then, so we do Detroit, and let's do performing arts. Say performing arts, and great. So now we got Detroit, we got the performing arts. We can see, it's centered in downtown Detroit. Let's go see the constellations of this, because yes, it makes sense. We can look at the top funders, but I want to see the constellations. So it's going to take a second, thinking, and here we've got this really pretty, very tightly knit set. We've got the Detroit Symphony Orchestra, and look at hovering on this. Look at all the funders for the Detroit Symphony Orchestra. Click on these guys, Sphinx Organization, and look at all these funders in here. This set of funders that are in the middle here, these funders are giving to multiple performing arts institutions. So let's look at who these guys are. Fisher, Ford, Knight, etc. So this shows a very densely packed network. So it looks like it's a good, thriving community, and there's really nothing. There's only a few offshoots kind of on the side. And my hypothesis is that this is the kind of networked community that would be is ideal. Where lots of funders have relationships with lots of nonprofits, and vice versa, and it's not so singularly dependent on only a couple of funders or recipients. Okay.
So it doesn't seem like there's any more questions.
Great. Well, thank you everybody for joining us today. Like I said, we're going to be doing these monthly, and we're going to be talking about new features. And if people have questions, feel free to email us at maps@foundationcenter.org. We will get back to you and answer your questions, and we want ideas for new features or anything that might seem confusing, or any bugs that you find where an export doesn't work or something like that. We want to know about those. And what we'll probably do every month, we will talk about some of the new features that we build or anything that we fix, or just use cases that come out. So also remember on maps.foundationcenter.org, you can sign up for the free trial. Let me go back to that.
And a whole lot of other information on those pages.
Yes. So if you go to, here I'll go back to this, the app, and I'll log out. There's information about getting custom options. There's videos, taking a tour. If you want some kind of a tutorial about how any of these things work, you can click on them here and get a tutorial. Contacts, there's a bunch of FAQs, some stuff about some of the data and methodology in some cases, and then descriptions of the features and all the stuff that it has inside at different levels. So thanks again, everybody. Feel free to email us, and we love to hear from you. We're not kidding. We really do. And thanks, and hopefully talk again soon. Bye, everybody.